Good evening, everyone. And welcome to the premiere of TRAILBLAZERS, a documentary celebrating the 1965 desegregation of St. Charles Parish Public Schools. I am Tamika Green, Executive Director of Equity and Student Support for the school system, and it is my honor to serve you as Mistress of Ceremonies for this evening. Several years ago, Mr. Ulysses Fronta, a former Destrehan High School teacher and 1965 Destrehan student, approached school board member Ellis Alexander with the idea of recognizing the first African-American students who volunteered to attend all previously white schools in St. Charles Parish. As many local individuals had no idea of the history of African-American students in regards to local education, Mr. Alexander requested a school system committee to be formed to develop plans for a celebration. But the celebration was delayed by several years due to COVID and Hurricane Ida. The committee determined that a video was needed to be able to tell the stories of these students, a documentary which current and future students and the general public would be able to view and learn from regarding our past and how it has led us to where we are today. We are honored to have several dignitaries in the audience, and I would like to invite School Board President Alex Suffren to the podium to introduce these individuals.
Thank you, Tamika. What is a trailblazer? The term trailblazer originally referred to someone who would leave his mark, known as a blaze, on tree barks as he ventured through the wilderness or unsettled country. These marks would provide a path for others to follow in the future as they traveled through the previously uncharted area. It is my pleasure to join my fellow school board members and other elected officials in honoring the trailblazers of 1965 who paved the path for future students. In attendance tonight are School Board Vice President and District 7 School Board Member, Mr. Art Oquan. District 2 School Board Member, Mrs. Melinda Bernard. District 3 School Board Member, Mr. Dennis Nakan. District 4 School Board Member, Mr. Sonny Savoy. District 5 School Board Member and Trailblazers Committee Member, Mr. John Smith. Judge Connie Oquan. State Senator Gary Smith, Mr. Gary Smith. State Representative, Mr. Greg Miller. St. Charles Parish Council Member at Large, Mrs. Holly Fonseca. St. Charles Parish Council Member, Ms. Lysandra Gordon. And St. Charles Parish Council Member, Mrs. Mary Cluley. The school board recognizes that our school system is thriving today, largely in part due to the brave former students we are recognizing tonight. Thank you for leaving your mark, your blaze, for others to follow. Thank you.
And now I invite Dr. Ken Ortling, Superintendent of St. Charles Parish Public Schools, to introduce the documentary.
Good evening. 68 years ago in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled unanimously in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka that racial segregation in America's public schools was unconstitutional. However, it wasn't until 1960 when Ruby Bridges famously walked into the all-white William J. France Elementary School in New Orleans, that the ruling began to affect Louisiana. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in programs or activities and organizations receiving federal funds. Despite society remaining segregated in terms of housing, social institutions, and oftentimes employment, St. Charles Parish Public Schools became one of the first 5 school districts in Louisiana to voluntarily sign the Title VI Compliance Act of 1965, then developed a plan to move forward. This integration plan, also known as the Freedom of Choice Plan, allowed parents of African American students to transfer their children to previously all-white schools to previously all-white schools within the parish. Approximately 43 students throughout the parish transferred schools in the middle of the 1965-1966 school year. And it wasn't until 7 years later, 1972, that all schools in the state of Louisiana were considered integrated. We're here tonight to celebrate these courageous students, many of them seating in our audience this afternoon, and their families for demonstrating amazing resolution, dignity, and resiliency through their actions and their words. As we listen to their astonishing stories, we will witness the intuition and wisdom of these families and will learn lessons which can be applied to our lives now in 2022. So without further ado, I give you Trailblazers.
I tell people I don't think of myself as a trailblazer, but I don't mind having it on my shoulders. I had 6 brothers and sisters. I knew that they were all younger than me. They were watching, and what I did, was going to affect them.
The first people to decide to step up and offer themselves as a sacrifice during those challenging times, I think that those individuals, we can't say enough about them.
On your first day of school, normally you see all of the friends that you missed during the summer. You're happy to see them. I didn't have that type of feeling. It was more of an isolated feeling on my first day of school. I felt like, when I walked up the stairs, I was walking up the stairs alone.
There was a lot of danger that these kids faced. There were people who were so committed to the notion that they would disrupt the smooth transition into an integrated society, that they were willing to do anything for parents and for children to step up and say, send me, I'll go. And I just think that was an amazing kind of thing.
I felt, people always ask me, gee, Rodney, it must have been really terrible growing up in southern Louisiana with racism and, all of the stuff going on and the bullwhips and people, colored water fountains and separate bathrooms and sitting in the back of the bus, which I actually did. But I tell people it wasn't really, because I lived in an all-black neighborhood. I went to school with all black kids. Until I went to Destrehan, I don't really recall even speaking to a white person.
They never put more than 2 of us in a class together. They made sure you sit in certain areas. For instance, as a black male, they didn't have us sitting next to the white girls. They made sure we sit towards the back of the room. We raised our hand to answer questions a lot of times. and we got ignored.
But when I think back on it as an adult, I realize how difficult that must have been. There were only a handful of children in one school who were coming in as part of desegregation. And I can only imagine how difficult that must have been for them because they didn't know any of the students. None of their teachers that they would have known from prior years were coming to the school. So I'm sure that they felt very lonely, and I would hope that in the future, people will always remember that no matter where children are coming from, how important it is to make them feel part of the school community and part of the school in general.
I remember the bus driver for the first 2 days wouldn't even pick us up. We were still at home when my father finished his bus route. So my father brought us in a car and we drove down the street that the bus drivers went down to drop off the kids for school. And my father told us to get out. He proceeded to bring us to that bus. And he told the bus driver, "You know who I am, and these are my children. You know where I live. Tomorrow, you will be picking them up."
You know, I can remember going to Denham Springs, and when I was a sophomore in a playoff game, and when we walked in the gym, with me being black, they booed us from the time we walked in till the time the game was over. And I talked to some of my ex-teammates, one in particular, and when he talked to me, he said he wasn't scared for himself, but he was scared for me. It wasn't like I was afraid to be there. In hindsight, I probably should have been, you know, when I think about it, because, you know, if something would have happened, there was nobody black in that gym other than me.
I think the gym was packed only because they wanted to jeer and holler and scream at Ulysses. That was a tough environment to play, and I'm a white guy walking into that gym. I have no idea how Ulysses felt. Look back and admire that he was able to even get through that night. I don't know how Ulysses did it.
And the first time I took the bus in the evening, there were some guys in the back of the bus, and they would say, "We're going to the N-wordville," you know. It's sad. You know, it's really sad that people just categorize things.
At recess, all of the black students, we would go on the side of the school, you know, and try to more or less encourage each other, you know, rather than because we didn't have anybody else encouraging us.
We're all in one world. You know, we need to support each other, and the only way to do that is to know each other, to share experiences, have common goals, and you can't do that when you have children segregated by race.
I recall, you know, the teachers being just very, very supportive. That's the thing I remember most, the teachers. Because once they realized that I was a pretty bright kid, they actually sort of pushed me. The civics teacher, but I remember he wrote in my yearbook, he said, "Don't let your experience at Deft give you a negative worldview." I remember that worldview because I had never heard that term before then. It just meant a lot to me. You know, we were at an assembly in the gym, and this guy from the American Legion got on stage and went to the microphone. He said, "And now, the winners of the American Legion Essay Contest, what it means to be an American. Rodney," you know, nobody, and Jan, Rodney, you won. I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, get up there. And so I go up on stage, and he turned around and looked at me. And the look on his face was priceless. You know, it was weird because he knew he had to shake my hand. And the band just went crazy. You know, yeah. And that's a moment that of my entire experience at Deft, that was one of the best. Because that's when I felt supported, I felt cared for, I felt loved, I felt respected.
I believe, had it not been for the fact that there were so many dedicated teachers at that time who took their jobs very seriously, about educating children. And they saw at that time that education was going to be the vehicle that would lead toward black youngsters improving their economic status and improving their overall life in the community. They gave it all. This school district, when you look at it now, has blossomed into a thriving school district that is second to none in the state of Louisiana and around the country. There were individuals in St. Charles Parish whose talents and whose abilities were being tremendously wasted.
And then after I went to Hahnville, I noticed the discrepancies in the type of school I went to. I noticed at Carver, the restrooms were subpar. When I went to Hahnville, the restrooms were, to me, cleaner and you know, didn't have any plumbing issues and things like that. I can't say the cafeteria was any different because those ladies can cook in both schools.
Mr. Smith, Raymond K. Smith, at one time when he was in charge of libraries, he actually would fill the trunk of his car with books, and he would go from one black school to the other, bringing library books, as opposed to the schools for the white kids who had their own in-house libraries.
So the facilities were definitely a lot better at Destrehan, along with the books and everything else, than we had at Bethune. You know, and it wasn't any fault of Bethune High School, it was just the way that things were being done back in the 60s. You know, the black schools got what was left. And I think that us going to Destrehan, like we did, it dispelled some of the myths. One of the myths was like, black students were not as smart as white students. You know, and they found out that, wait, that's not true. You know, some of these black kids are pretty smart.
Once you got in those classrooms and you saw, you know, the students that went there and the success that they had, then it didn't take you long to realize, hey, just like we are.
When you look at the growth that has taken place in St. Charles Parish, not only in the public schools arena, but the growth in terms of economic growth, it is because of the commitment that this board has had to eradicate the barriers of inequality and be sure that we were able to tap into the human resources that we have had here in St. Charles Parish and leave no child behind.
And if anything, that's what, you know, they can look back on and say, when they look at Destrehan High School today and they see the progress and, you know, the type of school it is, how it's renowned throughout the state, academically, athletically, in every way, I'm sure there's a little sense of pride.
What I hope for St. Charles Parish and all the students that go here, whatever their nationality is, I hope you learn how to be kind to each other, respectful of each other, not just look at a person and say, oh, they're different because of this or different because of that. Because everyone is a human being. Everyone has value. Diversity makes you a better person. It makes you more well-rounded. And for the future, it's yours. You can make this world better. When you all are in control, I hope I can see a better world.
Wow. That's pretty touching. And I'm going to go a little bit off script, but certainly I feel compelled to do so just based on obviously the courage, one, to tell the story of our school system from where we are to where we are currently and what it means. You know, one of the things we're actually focusing on this year, and it was mentioned in the film, was equity is about belonging, right? Dignity and belonging, treating each other with dignity, respect, and love, right? That's a God-given right that each and every one of us have. And it's unfortunate during that time period, it wasn't reflected as such. But I can tell you, based on what you, as former students who integrated into our schools in 1965, modeled for us, and that we continue to hold very closely those virtues and those values that you modeled so eloquently in 1965. So thank you for leading the way. Thank you for being a part of our traditioned and storied past, a past that we recognize has taken us to the point where we are today. So thank you, and the educators and the school board members that were all part of that process. So thank you so much. And please, let's give them a round of applause. These former students of St. Charles Parish Public Schools were certainly trailblazers who paved a path to our current school system's success and mission. As a school system, we prioritize equity and inclusion of all students, regardless of factors such as race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, physical and cognitive abilities, cultural ideologies, or any other factors that marginalize individuals. As these trailblazers demonstrated many years ago, every student, each and every student, is entitled to equitable educational opportunities so each is prepared to be successful in whatever occupation or life that they choose. In the words of Booker T. Washington, success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life, but by the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. These trailblazers and educators who supported their growth definitively overcame obstacles to start our school system on a path to provide equitable resources for all students, enabling an easier path to their success and the thousands of students who followed. On behalf of the St. Charles Parish Public Schools School Board and our school system's past and present leaders and educators, thank you.
I won't go off script because those of you who know me well will be here all night. So I'll stick to the script. Thank you, Dr. Ortling, for your comments. Before closing our ceremony, I would like to recognize individuals who made this documentary possible. Please stand as your name is called. Rachel Alamo, Ulysses Frantha, Rhonda Lorio Smith, Rodney Messier, Chipper Simon, John Smith for being interviewed for the documentary. Everybody give them a round of applause. And please remain standing. Mason Dauphin, who produced what I am sure, Stan Mason. All right, making sure. What we are sure we can all agree will be an award-winning documentary. Next, the members of the Desegregation Recognition Planning Committee, please stand. I think we're kind of all standing around the room. So applause to all of you for making this happen. And most importantly, last and definitely not least, the original 43 student trailblazers of 1965 were all trailblazers in this row, row number 2. Please stand. On behalf of St. Charles Parish Public Schools and the Trailblazers, thank you for joining us this evening to learn about and learn from our past. The meet and greet reception and gallery walk will remain open until 6:00 p.m. We also have cake that has been cut while we were in the premiere and a coffee station for you to enjoy until then. I encourage all of you to join us at the school board meeting, which begins at 6:30 p.m. this evening, because we are going to have a Trailblazers proclamation considered by our board this evening. Please reflect upon the stories you have heard tonight and incorporate lessons learned into your daily lives. I challenge each of you, as Ruby Bridges said, to not follow the path, but to go where there is no path and begin the trail. Thank you.